Welcome back to The Road Forward, a podcast for trucking industry leaders, brought to you by TruckSpy, the all-in-one fleet management platform built to empower your drivers to be compliant, productive, and safe. My name's Alex, and, well, the weather is really bad all around the country. It's like, as much as I'd want to bring in some articles and show you, it's just bad everywhere. So just keep in mind, I heard this obviously from, older drivers. It's like, no load is worth your life. So take it easy, slow down. I've been stuck in the snow before when I was on the road, so it is not fun. Like you think you're cool because you're passing everyone, but then when you're sitting in the ditch and everyone's passing you, it doesn't look so great. So slow down, take it easy, park it if you need to. But I do want to cover some headlines, and so we got a couple of good ones for you today. First up, we got Overdrive, okay? They're talking about tolls here. It's like, okay, toll roads on the rise. What's an operator's best electronic collections options, right? And maybe this is sponsored, maybe it's not, but the point remains the same, that it's like a 5-axle truck, okay, the article says, running the Pennsylvania Turnpike on I-76 east across the state can rack up to $212 toll by the time it exits the state near Scranton on I-81 without stopping once. And if the bill isn't paid in 30 days, you add another $5 fee on top of that. So that's for a Class 8 tractor trailer that doesn't use EasyPass for electronic toll collections. If you did use EasyPass, it would be $105. So the incentive for sure is to use EasyPass, right? That's kind of what they're pitching here. It's like you can save essentially $100 a trip if you're using an electronic toll collection like EasyPass. Saving money on tolls is great, but here's the problem, and this is where the article goes down to say, state-collected toll fees and fuel taxes, burden, of course, borne by owner-operators, among other highway users, account for about 37% of all funding for highway and road spending. And the 2021 highway bill will likely only continue to expand the number of toll roads as states seek ways to expand on federal government funding for new building projects. And that's the problem. It's like toll roads are only going to expand, and the article kind of outlines the options of what's available to you as a driver on the road. And, none of them are ideal. There isn't really one that covers all the states really well. I know, and they actually mentioned Texas. Darn it, Texas. Obviously I live in Texas, and so it's like Texas has some really bad tolls. Florida has some really bad tolls just because there isn't like a system that covers all of the toll roads. So it's frustrating for the end user. It's frustrating, right? But of course, the problem is like there's going to be more and more and more tolls built continually. And so it's like, darn it. Maybe some fuel prices are finally coming down. Maybe truck prices are coming down. We're going to talk about that next. But toll roads and toll prices are going up. So it's like you can't ever win. Goodness gracious. But I want to talk about, speaking of truck prices and them coming down, we got FreightWaves article, once in a lifetime, right here, pricing boom in used trucks reverse course, right? And so here they're talking about truck pricing and owner operators or drivers or people that truck drivers that overpaid for trucks maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago. They're now seeing these trucks get discounted. So the article goes, used truck prices reverse year-over-year gains in November for the first time since 2020, suggesting a normalized environment is returning after a year of unprecedented highs. Article goes on to say, at retail, the average sleeper tractor was 73 months old, had about 469,000 miles, and was basically bought for $89,810 according to Power. For the first time since August 2020, year-over-year prices for used trucks have dropped in the aggregate, ACT Research reported. So think about it. Like, dude, I remember when a truck, I've been in trucking for a few years, right? And it's like, I remember when trucks like this at 400,000 miles were $50,000 trucks. 89 grand for a used truck with almost 500,000 miles. That was the average. That's terrible. So if you're in the truck, if you've been patient this entire time, and now you're going to be in the truck market, just keep in mind truck prices are starting to stabilize and they're, going down. So keep your eyes open for good deals, because pretty soon good deals are going to start becoming more and more available. So that's always good news. And the last article I want to cover before we get into our interview is from Landline. Okay, it is another hair testing proposal bites the dust. Okay, this is this is funny. Like, obviously there's the consortium, the clearinghouse, and drivers are required to do randomized drug screenings and whatnot. But it looks like the Trucking Alliance's latest attempt to get hair testing results included in the FMCSA's Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse has been denied. So obviously, I'm not condoning, going out there and doing drugs and stuff. Obviously, definitely not. Don't do that. If you're a professional driver, take this, take it seriously. You're operating a vehicle that's very heavy and there's a lot of responsibility. But it's like, when is enough enough? Like, you guys are already poking and probing us, or not us, but like commercial drivers. I don't have my CDL, but you're probing commercial driver license holders all the time, and it's like, when is enough? And so what's funny is the article right here. The motor carriers in the Trucking Alliance include Cargo Transporters, okay, Dupree Logistics, Frozen Food Express, JB Hunt Transport, KLLM Transport Services, Knight Transportation, Maverick Transportation, Schneider, Swift Transportation, US Express, and May Trucking Company. And by golly, if that doesn't show you that mega carriers are always trying to stomp out the little guy, I don't know what else, because it's just ironic how literally this Trucking Alliance, you would think like, oh, Trucking Alliance, it's a name that you would think like, oh, it's a bunch of, individual owner operators or drivers, they're, in alliance. No, it's just mega carriers, right? So it's another thing that mega carriers are trying to shove down the throats of owner operators as if it wasn't hard enough for us on the road, right? So it's like, oh my goodness. But I thought it was a funny article. As your analysis satisfies the current drug and alcohol testing requirements, according to the FMCSA. However, many large fleets require their employees to undergo hair and urine testing. Though its request, the Trucking Alliance wanted to pass on information about failed hair tests to other motor carriers, right? But again, it's not required by the FMCSA. So you as the company owner can certainly require that, right? So it's like you can have that policy in your company, but you're not required to share that data. And it's like, this is probably, again, truck driver shortage, right? It's like it all starts to make kind of sense, I guess. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's just, I thought it was a good article. But I will link all this stuff in the description down below. And now I want to get into our interview, okay? With Kyle. Kyle's an interesting guy. Started out as a FedEx contractor, and then he slowly got his own authority, and now he's hauling a lot of freight for Amazon. So a lot of insight. If you're totally new into the trucking space, this might be the guy you want to listen to, talk to, reach out to, just because FedEx is certainly a great option for those total newbies, which is fine. Everybody was new at one point in time, but Kyle actually breaks it down with the challenges, the benefits, and pros and cons of each. So let's just get into that. Kyle, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. It's good to be here with you guys today.
That's awesome. So give us a brief history, how you got into trucking and what led you to FedEx.
Okay. So when we got into the FedEx and started looking at the FedEx business model, I was working at UPS in their marketing department. I was studying competitors for UPS. I covered the Postal Service, but the guy that sat next to me was the FedEx guy. And I'd hear him talking all the time about the FedEx contractor model and how you could do both the line haul and the P&D stuff. And the P&D stuff, because I've done several ride-alongs when I was at UPS, and I was like, nah, I don't want to be involved in P&D. There's a lot of work there and a lot of moving parts, not even that. So, the simplicity of the line haul model, as I started digging into it and doing some research on it, I really liked that. And so always wanted to have my own business. And so kind of while we're, doing some research at night while I'm, hearing what I hear, in the water cooler at UPS, and then doing my research at night when I got home on, what the business model entailed and everything, my wife and I decided, hey, let's maybe make her go with this. We initially looked at buying an existing contractor that was here in the Atlanta area. We're based in Atlanta, by the way, and couldn't really make it work. Didn't really have the funds for it, but I was like, man, FedEx at the time, FedEx was growing and they were dumping a lot of money into the ground network. So there's got to be a way to get something directly from FedEx. If we can get something directly from FedEx, then maybe we don't have to come up with all this capital to buy some routes. So that's exactly what happened. My wife, actually, since I was still working at UPS, she networked with a lot of people on LinkedIn, and we got a contact on LinkedIn that said, hey, there's some runs available here in the Atlanta area, but all the postings come down tomorrow. So we're like, holy crap, what do we do? So we went home. We found a little bit on the internet of what FedEx was looking for in RFIs. Well, this is back before. This is in 2015. So before they didn't even have like what they do now, where they email you the RFI forms and all that stuff. They didn't even have that back then. They're just like put a business plan together and submit it to us. And I'm like, I don't even know what you guys want. Like what do you guys want to see? So we found I was about 10 or 12 pages deep on a Google search, and I found some site that was hosting somebody's PDF document that actually had answers. So I got a hold of the questions, and we stayed up till about 2 a.m. that night writing it, submitted it, and we got 3 unassigned teams. Kind of fast forward, and this is in August of 2015, and we're sitting here thinking, okay, they'll give us 3 or 4 months to get started, and they go, can you be up and running in October? And we're kind of like, man, that's like 5 months from now. So my wife quit her job. And then I did what I could while I was still working. We got set up. We went out and bought 3 trucks we could afford. All we had at the time really was good credit. So you leverage that good credit to take out some personal loans to get the down payments and the startup cash for the business. And we got those 3 trucks, unassigned teams running out of Kennesaw or Marietta Terminal. We got those staffed. We had 2 of them staffed by October 1st. And then the last one was staffed at Thanksgiving. It took us a little bit longer to get those. We had some drivers bounce around, as I'm sure a lot of other people know with teams, but we had all those up and running by Thanksgiving, those 3 trucks. We added a 4th right then, and then that first year or so, we grew it, and then eventually our biggest time, we grew it all organically from 3 teams, and then we're at our peak with FedEx, we were at 23 trucks, 21 contracted routes, and half of those dedicated, half of those unassigned, and that was at the probably end of 2020, beginning of 2021, when we were our largest with FedEx. And so that's where we grew. We did it all organically, so it is possible. There's a lot of sweat equity built into that business model there. A lot of different things, and a lot of good experiences. Some people say we should write a book about it. I think if all our contractors got together and wrote just the experiences you have with, the nuances of FedEx, and also just dealing with truck drivers in general, it's interesting. So. And then going back to that, we chose line haul. It's in our previous talks we said it's a simple business model. It's not an easy business model by any means, but it's a simple business model. You literally get some trucks, you hire some drivers, you put them in the truck, you teach them how to run for FedEx, and then FedEx tells you what trailers to take to point A to point B, and then did all that. So there's not all the stuff. It's pretty straightforward when it comes to the P&D side, where you got price rates per stop, mileage in between stops, all the different stuff that goes into those contracts that I've seen. So, so that's why we settled on line haul, and we've been very successful with it growing up until now. And then about a year ago this time is when we decided we wanted to get our own DOT authority and start doing some stuff outside of FedEx. And so we've learned how to kind of navigate that world as well. FedEx was really a good stepping stone for that, but we kind of see if we really want to do some growth. And we've also done it in our own backyard. I know there's a lot of guys they'll go set up 10 trucks here, 10 trucks in 10 trucks in Atlanta, 10 trucks in Nashville, set up on these different areas. We want to stay home. We like being around our home area. I don't really want to be traveling around a whole lot. So that's kind of our preference there where we did it here. So we felt for us to kind of keep that growth up, we needed to be able to open ourselves up to other customers here in the Atlanta market. And the best way for us to do that, we felt, was get our own DOT authority. So now we're doing that. And as it comes out now, our biggest customer by far is Amazon there. And we've been able to quickly ramp up. We actually took all of our unassigned teams out of FedEx and moved those trucks over, and we're running solos for Amazon. So at this point now, we've got about 15, 16 trucks a week running for Amazon as well. So growing that business out, and we were able to do it very quickly there. Amazon systems, pretty cool, allows you to do that if you've got the power and got the drivers and the insurance and all that other stuff, then you can do it. So that's kind of where we're at now versus where we started, and just trucking along.
Great. Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. And so for the totally new people to FedEx, P&D is package and delivery, right? Just if anybody's wondering. And then line haul, like you explained, is it's almost like power only, correct? Where you just take a FedEx trailer and then you drop it off and then take another one and bring it back, right? So
definitely.
Along those lines, correct?
Yeah, you're a power only carrier. You're pulling their trailers. and you're moving in between their terminals. So there's no in
Okay.
deliveries. You're just moving trailers in between their facilities. When I first got to UPS, it took me a minute to learn the line haul term, but it's the line between terminals. The line haul in just from sorting facility to
Okay.
sorting facility is where you're at. So yeah,
Okay.
so that's even different than, say, we've done some like live, full deliveries too, where you got to get live loaded, live unloaded. It's kind of those extra steps. So you're really just doing those steps in between. And other people outside of FedEx call it middle mile. So you got first mile, middle mile, last mile. So the first mile is picking up the package or the delivery, taking it to the sort center. The middle mile is sort center to sort center, and then the final mile is sort center to the final destination. So
yeah, to the door, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, and so like if I don't know if you're under NDA or something like that, but like how much can a truck roughly gross per month or per year, like doing line haul at FedEx?
On FedEx side, a team truck, man, they can do, if you're running miles. We had unassigned teams at some points probably doing 500,000-600,000 a year in revenue, just on those, because you're doing, some of those trucks are doing 250 to 300,000 miles a year. So yeah, you can see that kind of revenue there, especially some dedicated. Solos are going to be probably 250-ish in that area for solos. Probably it's going to depend on the miles. And FedEx, you get paid a fixed rate per mile, so then it's going to be so that's going to be dependent. It's basically with FedEx, the name of the game is run as many miles as you can, and so that's why we focused on teams for so long, because you got the biggest bang for the buck out of that. You're running in some cases the team will run triple the miles a solo can do in each week. So so that's where you get the utilization there. So on the flip side, you're wearing your assets out, but you got to replace your assets more frequently, but you can get more revenue out of those assets while you have them. So.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when I crunched the numbers on team. Obviously at FedEx you're under their insurance, but but now you have experience your own carrier. Your insurance cost is the same. If you have a fixed truck payment, it's the same. Whether you do 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles a month, you have two big payments that are going to stay the same no matter how many miles you do. And so it's like the more miles you can cram in a month, the better off you are, actually. So yeah, I've done the numbers on team versus solo many times, and it's absolutely awesome to do teams like revenue wise. But you mentioned roughly about $250,000 gross. I mean, that seems pretty in line with what trucking companies or owner operators are doing gross on the spot market. So it's like, what difference have you seen? Whether it's from FedEx going to Amazon, because a lot of truckers, they're like their first priority is like, how much am I going to make? How much am I going to make? Like, that's usually a first question. So it's like, what difference have you noticed specifically in regards to revenue now that you have this opportunity to see kind of behind the curtain on both sides?
So we came into our own DOT authority on the end of the big 2021 boom. And so initially, and these have come down some, but initially we saw profit margins on our solos in the first half of 2022 that were equal to a team on FedEx. So running that. Now those have come down, but we're still profitable. And with teams are great, but I think at one point, and this is probably why we backed out, is we got too heavy on. You got too reliant on them. Because the teams are going to be really sensitive to the overall market, not just like the FedEx market, but the overall trucking market. And what we found is, and teams are tough. You're playing matchmaker between two guys. Rarely do you get that, brother, couple of brothers, or a husband and wife, or father son, mother, father daughter, whatever it is. Rarely do you get those teams. I think we've had maybe 3 or 4 husband and wife teams with us. We've got one with us now that's awesome. They've been with us for going on 3 years now. They're the textbook of what you'd want a husband and wife team to be. They come to work. They don't seem to be if they are arguing outside of work, they're not bringing it to work with them. They come up, they show up. And then we've also had, husband, wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend driving for us, and they're calling me at 11 o'clock at night. They're supposed to be at work at midnight, and they're like she kicked me out of the truck. And I'm like, oh man, it's our truck, and they're somewhere, and they're out in Texas somewhere, and you're like, well, I need you to get back in the truck, and you're calling her, you're doing the matchmaker, and then you got guys, that are running, and what we were doing was the unassigned teams. That's what we had a lot of, and we had that figured out really well for a while. But there's a certain demographic there, so you're whittling down your driver base very thin because you need doubles. You gotta have a driver that can get doubles. And then you gotta have a driver that's willing to run teams. Then you had to have a driver for unassigned that was willing to be home, maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks on those. And so you whittle down your driver base there. And so we really had a sweet spot for a while of, say, mid 40s to mid 50s was our driver base. Because those are the people that had stable home lives, or they didn't have anybody at home really that they had to look after or keep up with. So, when we run that, so the teams, you whittle down your driver base, and it's really for that, it's all going to be about money. If you can offer good money and those guys can make more than they're running solos, that'll happen. What happened in 2021 is that flipped. Like I said, we were running solos that had the same. So in a down market like we're kind of in now, teams are going to pick back up. You're going to be well because the money equation, the money is going to start outpacing what they were making solo. Whenever the driver market turns to where they can go make money solo more than they can make team, that's when then you're going to struggle to recruit. And so that's the drawback with teams. And so on solos, you don't have as much fluctuation there. Guys always usually want to run solo. And then on our DOT authority side of the business, there's no doubles endorsement and things like that. So we've kind of widened our driver base there that we were required to. And then you can also, we've done a little bit. We also have some drivers that go back and forth between our FedEx business and our DOT authority business. And so we've done a little bit of that too. So guys that wanted to change or try something different. But those are the two big differences with the solo versus the team. And obviously a team a team that really hustles can do 6,000 miles a week. A solo driver that can hustle maybe can do 2,800 to 3,000 miles a week. Now they start running that 3,000 miles a week consistently. For a solo guy, we found after about 4 or 5 months, those guys are worn out. They start making mistakes. They start having incidents, things like that. The teams can do it a little bit longer, but that's kind of what you run out to. But we always tried to keep 2,500-ish miles on a solo, 5,000 miles on a team. That seemed to be a good balance of guys getting the money they wanted to make and also them being rested, having a good home life when they are home, and they're not just worn ragged at the end there. So,
Right.
So those are the kind of things you got to look at running teams versus solos.
Right. It's super interesting hearing you say that. It's like simultaneously your advantage, which is like, hey, we're team transport, right? Like that's your advantage. That then became the bad thing or the or the downside of the business. It's like how ironic. Your advantage becomes your downside. That's crazy. But so like. Now that you have experience, having your own authority and and working for FedEx, what advice or what suggestions do you have? Maybe somebody that is looking to become a motor carrier, because I think the numbers that last time I heard is like over the last year and a half or so. It's been over 20,000 new motor carriers, like new MCDOT numbers, 20,000 new per month for the last year. And that's excluding these summer months, that was up until March. And then slowly a bunch of them started to unfortunately go out of business because the rates declined so quickly. But it's like, obviously, but there's still a lot of interest in trucking. There's a certain amount of stability that comes from it. Like, what suggestions do you have? Should somebody look at FedEx if they're totally brand new in trucking, or should they just jump in and do the DOT? Like, what suggestions do you have, Kyle?
We had looked at it because I was actually planning when we were going through the initial startup phase with FedEx. I'd been looking at getting our own DOT authority and doing that, but and now it's kind of as a backup in case we didn't get any contracts from FedEx. But what FedEx did is that we went in, and I'm glad we kind of use that as like a training or it's a way to get your feet wet, especially if you're small. We learned very quickly. You started learning all the different things that are required that we now know, but back then I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know about base plates. I had no idea that your IFTA, how it was calculated, that the fuel tax, you then had to do a report over how many miles you drove in each state versus how many gallons of fuel you bought in each state. And then you had to do the crisscross of the money to each state from the fuel tax program. You had, and the same thing with registrations and things like that. So all that stuff coming into FedEx, they do all that for you. They do your own IFTA, they do your own base plates, and you can then learn what they do. And you kind of learn some of the different things, making sure you got the federal annual inspections and all that stuff. Because I'm also a guy that I'll skim through an instruction manual, but I'm really going to learn it. I'm not going to learn it until I actually do it. And so had we done that with our DOT authority, we probably wouldn't have been successful, just because, man, there's so much to learn. There's a whole lot to learn, because even there's a lot of stuff that I thought I knew going into having our own authority. Then I start getting into it, and you just realize, oh wait, man, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and we had to kind of rethink something. When it comes to your own DOT authority now, everything with FedEx is dropping hooks. So you just hook up the trailer and go from point A to point B. Well, now you don't realize, okay, now there's loading times that you got to worry about. You never worried about loading times. You just had to worry, okay, go pick up this, go, then leave. Now you're like, well, I got to get loaded. Okay, well, it shouldn't, not every facility is created different. Well, some facilities get you in and out in an hour. Some facilities you'll be there all damn day, and you lose. That's the day you lose the revenue on either side. So, all those things that you kind of pick up as you go. So FedEx was a good way for us to learn that. And then once we kind of got comfortable with things throughout the years, and I'd recommend every FedEx contractor do this. So once you get comfortable with the system, you kind of get to a steady state. We started getting our own base plates, and we started running our own IFTA, because those are two big compliance pieces that you need to have if you're going to have your own authority. And it gives you more flex. And it also gave us more flexibility. The reason we did it is it gave us more flexibility it gave us more flexibility with how we could manage our trucks within FedEx. And that's one of the reasons we did it. But then it turns out now we've got the ability to, I could run a truck, say a truck gets taken off my schedule A or something. Well, I can just now go run that truck outside of FedEx, or I can still bring it back into FedEx and run it there as a temp lease. You've got those options. And then also kind of doing your own IFTA and doing your own base plates takes a lot of the paperwork out of it. Some of the extra stuff that FedEx requires paperwork-wise kind of can go away a little bit if you do that. It makes things a lot simpler. So, and those are two big things that give you flexibility, but then you also have to do that as your own motor carrier. So if you get those things in place, that's kind of like maybe level 2. The first level is getting started and getting going, and then level 2 is kind of adding in some of these services that once you realize that that's what FedEx does for you, then you can start taking those on yourselves, and it helps you streamline your business that way, and then you'll be ready for some of the other stuff too. So running.
Right. Then you get to enjoy the benefits of having to manage your own hut in New York, having to manage your own KYU number in Kentucky, having to get your own Oregon permit, Arizona, New Mexico.
That KYU is one that we learned on the way. I always seen the number on the sides of trucks, and I had no idea about it. And then we had a guy get stopped where maybe we got our authority last October, and so we didn't really have anybody running in Kentucky until this was maybe February, March. The guy calls me at 2 a.m. Hey, Kyle, I'm stopped up here, and they say you don't have this KYU number. They ran our DOT, they got the cameras on the DOT, and they picked up. So then I had to get up and pay the KYU. I had to go pay the back KYU tax for the last couple months and sign up for a new KYU number before they'd let you get out of the weigh station. So, that's one of the things that you learn. The HUT, we had one guy go to New York once. I got a temporary hut, but so we didn't do that. But yeah, we stay. We now with that business, we stay in the Southeast. So really, the only state that's kind of got the weird stuff is Kentucky. But yeah, you start learning some of that stuff as you go. And I think we're running cross country teams, running the unassigned teams for a while. We did learn a lot because we learned about running in Oklahoma where they want all your paperwork. They've got the separate. They've got their own DOT motor. Like Georgia's got the motor carrier compliance and the highway patrol. In Oklahoma, they've got those two divisions, but then they've also got a corporations police. and they've got their own separate inspection stations that just look at your paperwork that's in the truck. And so we paid a few fines for that, at 2 a.m. when the guys pass through there, stuff like that. So, so kind of that, you kind of learn all the different states. You kind of learn, okay, I want to run here. I don't want to run out in California anymore, stuff like that. So you can kind of get a little bit more strategic, I guess, with you can kind of pick where you want to pick the playground you want to play on, basically, is with
Right.
this versus the FedEx, you're playing in their playground. So
right. Why does it always have to keep happening at 2 a.m. though, huh, Kyle? It's
know.
always I'm in the middle of the night sleeping like a baby, and there you go, the phone's ringing, right?
Well, I'm a night owl too, so you'll usually find me. I'm usually up and down. That's part of that reason is there. I would, in the early days, I was like, okay, if I can make it past 1 a.m. without a phone call, and the phone doesn't ring here, then I can probably go to bed and not get woken up in an hour. Because falling asleep for an hour and then waking up is probably one of the worst things ever. So I would stay up until I knew I could get a good block of sleep in. So.
Right. Now, I asked the other FedEx contractors too, how does the whole bidding on lanes work? So is that the bidding process? Can you talk to me about that? Explain it to me, because I still don't understand it. When you bid, are you bidding on how much you could do it for, or are you bidding how much you'll pay?
No, so FedEx has everybody in line haul. It's different. It's different than the P&D world. I think P&D, from what I know, they bid on contracts. They say this is what they can do, and each contract has a different value to it. In line haul, essentially, there's a few variances here and there depending on location, but for the most part, every line haul contractor is given, this is the contract. This is the rate per mile. This is your fuel surcharge. This is how it works. This is what you get paid. So you run, and there's a slide. They got a little bit of a sliding scale, but essentially you got a fixed rate per mile. The more miles you run, the more money you make, or the more revenue you make. Okay. And so when it comes down to assigned lanes or bidding on runs, so there's a couple different processes. When you're getting an unassigned lane, so basically what they would call a CGO or a contracted growth opportunity, those are unassigned. So those are just a position where each terminal's got got a set of dedicated lanes, and then there's always this random freight that is consistent. But 1 week freight might be flowing from Atlanta to the Northeast. The next week, all the freight's going from Atlanta to out west. So they use the unassigned for those extra overflow lanes that pop up week to week that aren't necessarily consistent.
It's almost like FedEx's spot market, right?
Yeah, or in the LTL world, you hear extra board. It's kind of like that.
Right. Okay.
When you take on an unassigned lane, you're running kind of an extra board type thing. Okay. And usually on teams, the work was very consistent. On solos, on unassigned solos, the work's hit or miss depending on the part of the year. And that's where but anyway, so those you just say, hey, I have the ability to take on that capacity. I can take on some unassigned teams or some unassigned solos. And here's my business case. They'll look at your safety if you're an existing contractor. If you're not an existing contractor, they'll kind of look at you and do some interviews and say, what's your background? So those are awarded based off kind of your relationship with the terminal manager, the people in the area. They know you. You got a good safety record with FedEx. If you're going outside of your normal area, say we wanted to set up shop in Nashville, it would be me kind of making my case to the Nashville manager who doesn't necessarily know who we are or who our company is. And you're saying, hey, we want to come in, and you're competing against other people submitting those RFIs or bid proposals to get those growth opportunities. And then as you gain, so they have the seniority system for assigned runs. So your dedicated lanes that have a set schedule, a set per miles per week. It's something that's more consistent and has basically it's scheduled. It's going to run every day. Those are your assigned lanes. So those are the only way to get those is either you buy them from somebody or you build up your run positions. And then when they come up for bid, either a contractor loses the run changes, or it's a new run, FedEx will then offer it up for bid. And so now it used to just be straight up off seniority points. Each contractor gets seniority points, and then during peak, you have the opportunity to get bonus points. Depending on your mileage threshold, there's kind of an incentive program where you can get bonus points. But then once you if you get the one, then you can basically, you want to accumulate as many points as possible, throw them on one tractor, and then you use that tractor to bid on a run, and then you do the same thing on all your other tractors throughout the year. So over the course of 5 or 6 years, we converted. We started from scratch, and we were able to convert them. I think we've got 12. At our biggest point, we had 12 assigned runs between teams and solos. And so,
Wow.
so it took a little bit, but now what they have, it's now a combination of weighted. It's your points you have on the tractor, your seniority points, and then you also have a safety score, and then your your availability score. So say you lose a driver and you can't service a run for a few weeks, then that affects your availability score. So it's a factor of all those different things. And then there's also now your safety score. If you're they've got a 5-tier safety system. Tier 5 is the best. Tier 1 is the worst. If you're tier 1 or tier 2, you don't even get considered for those. So they're putting a big emphasis on your safety score and how safe you operate. And they're basically saying, we don't care if you've got seniority. If we don't consider you a safe operator, you're not going to be awarded, new runs. Or if you're a contractor looking to add in more bid runs or more growth opportunities, your safety is going to be considered in those too. So that's kind of how those run. So there's no pay involved in it. You're not saying, hey, I can run this lane for 10 cents a mile cheaper than the other contractor. You're basically making a case from how good a contractor you are for those, and then the assigned runs are basically that point system that's kind of set by their system.
Right, because the confusing part is that terminology. It's like you can bid on this lane, and so it's not necessarily, you're not actually bidding on anything. Yeah. It's more or less like just make a case of why we should use you as the contractor for this specific lane. Unless, of course, the only time money is involved is, like you said, if you're buying those from a different FedEx contractor, right? That's the only time.
And you can buy those, but FedEx still has to approve. So, if you're selling some runs, FedEx, and you find a buyer, FedEx has to approve that buyer. So they've got to be able to demonstrate they've got knowledge in trucking, that they're going to be involved, those kind of things. And so that's kind of part of it as well. When you're buying them, but yeah, you can buy them, and that's just kind of set by the market, and what somebody will pay for them. You might pay a different rate than what I might pay. They're different buyers. Just depending on what you think you can do with it, those kind of things. So. But yeah, so those are the two ways to get assigned runs, or dedicated. They call them dedicated. I think the terminology bid comes from you bid your points on them. So you say, okay, my tractor's got 10,000 points on it, or 1,000 points. I'm bidding that tractor on this lane because I think it's got the most points it can beat the other contractors, basically.
I see. Right. Okay, that makes sense. And I know I've seen online some people do custom critical. So is FedEx custom critical a totally separate something else? I know a lot of times it requires a team.
Yeah, that's a completely different business unit. So all of FedEx's business units are siloed. So ground and express. If you gave an express package to a ground driver, it wouldn't get to where you want it to go. It's got to, the networks don't really intercross. There is a little integration now, but in general, ground's ground, express is express, freight, they're all different companies. They've all got different DOT numbers, and custom critical is just like that. Custom critical is be more like, most of those guys are probably owner operators that buy one of those box trucks or something, and they're hiring somebody to run that. And that's a much different, we looked into it a long time ago, and it's a much different area. It's different types of freight. There's really nothing crosses over from ground into custom critical. It's completely different people. They're headquartered in different places. Ground's in Pittsburgh. The custom critical people are in Ohio somewhere. So those are completely different business units. So if you wanted, I don't know much about. I just know we looked into it once, and it was a little bit more complicated than line haul, I thought. So, and then, so I think ground's a better opportunity, but that might have changed too. You never know. Like I said, a lot of this is all dependent on the market, even within FedEx. So.
Right, for sure. And how has the drivers, how has their response been
going from FedEx to you going out on your own authority? Are they complaining a little bit more, like, hey, I want to do drop and hook, but you tell them, hey, at least you're not driving team? Like, how does that?
Yeah.
What are the common driver issues with doing this?
So when we moved over, and a lot of our Amazon stuff, so Amazon's a really great program too for starting up, and we were able to really ramp up that business quickly. But they're still different. We're trying to build on our DOT authority side. We're trying to build out the runs we do. We're trying to keep everything regional. And this is what I said, you got to really be selective in your strategy. So we're still doing a lot of power only. We're doing a lot of regional. Everything we do is drop and hook. We had some guys running for some other brokers where they would do live load, live unload. And like I told you earlier, sometimes you end up at a facility that the dock workers didn't show up that day, and you're stuck there for 8 hours. And you got to pay that driver. You want to keep that driver happy, so you got to pay him. If it's a driver you don't want to keep happy, then maybe you don't pay him. But those kind of things you got to factor those in. And so after we had a few experiences with that over a few months, we're like, man, this truck just I had a truck that only made it made 20% of what it should have made that week, and it was because of the time frames, the load overlaps, those kind of things. So we decided, hey, all right, what we're going to do now is we're focusing on drop and hook lanes, or if we have trailers or we get customers, we're going to say, okay, we'll service this, but it's got to be a drop lane where we'll drop a trailer, you load it, and then we'll come back and pick it up later. So we're on those type of things as we build out. That's what the strategy we're taking is, trying to build out those drop and hook things. Because you got to be careful with that. So because you can eat up a lot of time and make drivers really unhappy, and they'll leave, they won't stay. So we think that drivers want to run a regional schedule on drop and hook lanes or things like that. So we kind of still stay in that area.
Okay.
And then as far as the kind of the difference there with Amazon versus FedEx, Amazon's really good. The guys got to know it. It's different than FedEx. You can't. And FedEx is different than FedEx is its own. FedEx line haul is its own brand of trucking versus everything else. And we spent a lot of time, especially with the team guys. You had to educate those guys when they come in, because they're used to what they did at JB Hunt or Swift or wherever they came from before. They're used to doing stuff there. The FedEx brand of trucking, especially the unassigned world and even the dedicated world, it's different. So you got to educate those guys on what's coming in. So we've had some guys that say, hey, okay, I'd like to go around Amazon. I see you guys got some Amazon trucks, or you got some trucks, we saw your UFL services trucks. What are they doing? You start telling them, okay, I'd like to try that out. So, okay, all right, put the FedEx stuff aside and come over here. Here's the way this runs. And so you got to, again, it comes to a matchmaking thing. And we probably had 5 or 6 drivers that have done both. And I'd say the majority actually stay with what they're doing. Now the guys that are still on Amazon, those are guys that came from the unassigned world, because with Amazon, your routes change every week. Your schedule times change some. So you're not all, it's not, but with FedEx, that run is Tuesday through Saturday, Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday. It's the same every day. The Amazon stuff that we do is different. They're running generally the same schedule, but, one weekend you might work a weekend, 1 week you might work a weekend, the other week you're off the weekends, so it changes. And so what we found is the guys that were on those dedicated schedules, the same schedule every week, they did not like the changes and the inconsistency. The FedEx provides that good, stable thing there versus now the unassigned guys that we have, especially the unassigned team guys, they're running our Amazon stuff now. They like it, man. They're like, man, I'm in a truck by myself. I'm making about the same amount of money I was running teams, although now it's down some. But so it really comes down to knowing the type of work that you're doing. Within trucking, and a lot of people are like, oh, hey, you got a truck? Can you take this from point A to point B? Well, no, I can't, because that's not what we do. You got to know what you do in trucking. Pick a niche, pick something that you do. Or in our case, we knew what we were good at. Okay, we're good at drop and hook. We're good at point A to point B, line haul type stuff. Let's build that into what we're doing over here on the DOT authority side, and find customers and find people that want to do that. Because then you can maybe have drivers that go back and forth. or you have things that can translate. But, and, you know, like I said, we like doing that too. It's, you know, the type of work we did at FedEx, we know it. We've been doing it for 6 or 7 years. We've tried to build that out over there, but with your drivers, you got to know what type of work you're doing. And, you know, a pickup and delivery driver is not going to be the same as a line haul driver. A dedicated team guy is not going to be the same as an unassigned team guy. You got to know what you're recruiting for and kind of target those drivers of who's going to be good for this job. So you got to know the market. Right. You got to know what you're doing to really kind of recruit and say, hey, is this guy even going to work? If I take this guy off of this run and I put him on this, is he going to even know what to do? I mean, for example, we've got some runs that we're doing for a customer where we drop trailers, and we have most of the guys can get to this. They can get to the run on time. They know when the pickup schedules are. They know, okay, I got to leave at this amount of time to get up to, because we have a run that goes from Charlotte back to Atlanta. And so drivers, if they don't have a load, they got to take an empty, go up to Charlotte and get back, and they got to budget the time, you know, to get there. Most of the guys can get there on time, but we had one driver or a couple drivers that would run it, and the guy was on it for a month and he was never on time for that run. Then we put him back on the other stuff that he had been doing on time all the time. And so again, we like, man, that particular driver just didn't work in that situation. So you got to, like I said earlier with teams, we're not doing it as much with solos, but you got to match those guys. You got to match your employees up and your drivers up with what's good for them and the type of work you have. And then you also got to know when to pass on a driver. Hey man, this, you know, if either a driver's a problem. So as a business owner, those are the kind of things you got to make, the decisions you got to make, the kind of things you got to identify. When it comes to the drivers running for FedEx versus running for Amazon, you know, those different things. There's some of those things in there is learning your market and knowing the type of work you do and who's going to be good at what you do, and to basically keep everything running. So.
Right. And I see you have a picture of that's a Mack Anthem. What kind of trucks are you running on the road? What, you know, are they all different, or you're trying to stick to a brand or a specific type? And like, what has been, you know, talk to me about what trucks you're utilizing.
So we are, I think most of our fleet is overwhelming majority. We've got about 26 trucks in the fleet right now. Let's see, all but 6 of those are Mack Anthems. When we started looking around for trucks, and the other trucks the other non-Macks are Volvos. And so Mack and Volvo owns Mack. And so they're basically, the insides of the trucks are the same as far as engine and transmission and everything else goes. Now, when we did our first order of Macks, we ordered 10 of them back in 2018. And, you know, Mack really kind of rolls out the red carpet. They kind of specialize in, you know, smaller fleets, kind of that personalized connection. And we've had a really good relationship with our Mack dealer here, Nextran. Nextran's an amazing dealer. They're growing across the country too. So they're not just originally they're just Southeastern. Now they've got stuff kind of out in the Midwest and out in Colorado now. But they've been a great dealer to work with. And so when we ended up picking trucks, you know, Mack is not. Most people would have told you before, a Mack sleeper, a Mack highway truck. Back before they released the Anthem, Mack didn't have a good highway truck really. The interiors weren't great, but then they redesigned it, and we had looked at all the different options. We had gone to Penske for full service leases, Ryder for full service leases, and then we went and talked to, you know, all the other dealers, Freightliner, and many probably consider Freightliner probably the class of the industry, especially for highway trucks and things like that. But when we kind of looked, we didn't feel like we were going to get the best service out of the dealer network. You know, Freightliner's got, I can't remember what the market share is for Freightliner, but they've got roughly the same amount of dealers as Mack and Volvo do. But there's more trucks for Freightliner. So when it came down to service at the time, we felt like we would get better service. So it came down to a dealer network. And also Nextran was the closest to where we park most of our trucks. Nextran was the closest dealer to those guys. And so every new truck is going to break down, and it doesn't matter. We've had trucks with 2,000 miles on them. We got to go take them into the shop or something. So the service network of the truck is as important as just the build of the truck. So having a network, having the ability to do that, and Volvo and Mack have a really good system. They've got the uptime centers. They've got where you can get work done fairly quickly at a dealer, and a good communication system with that. And we've liked it, and so we've stayed with it. We stayed in the Mack and Volvo, in the Volvo family for the last 4 years, and we'll continue that way because I've got 5 Volvos on order and 5 Macks on order for 2023. So we're going to stay there. So it's a good thing, and they run well. The Mack, the drivers will tell you the Mack is not quite as spacious inside, but it drives really well. And Mack and Volvo have the same engine and transmission. The Mack, and I've driven both of them. I think the Mack rides really smooth. It's got a smooth, quiet ride. And we used to have a little bit of complaints because, like I said, it's a little tight in the Mack cabin for teams. But once all the guys that run Macks only for solos, we get 0 complaints out of them. And so, they've got the same reliability as Volvos and everything. So they've been very good. So that's what we run. And that picture is actually we were in Nextrans. We were featured in Nextrans calendar last year. So that's the October. We were October for there. They had a bunch of local guys, from here in the southeastern area. There was a couple other guys I've met that were in the calendar as well. So that was a cool experience. We took that. We had to rent a trailer and they took us there, and it's a bridge going over a lake up here in North Georgia. So that was a cool experience too.
Right, I believe it. Well, I mean, Kyle, it's been a good one. You answered all my questions, so I appreciate you taking the time coming on. I know for a fact anybody that's looking into FedEx and whatnot, this has been a helpful episode for them. Where do you want me to point people to? Do you have anything you want me to link below? Your LinkedIn, Instagram?
Yeah. So if you search for my name, just Kyle Behnke on LinkedIn, you can message me there. And then we got a website. If you're a driver, driveufl.com, take you right to our employment application. And then our main website is united-federal.com. And we do have a contact, and you can reach out to us there. And then we're on Facebook and Instagram as we have there. So if you got any questions or anything, or just want to reach out, you can find us on those, or shoot a contact info in through the website. So.
Right. Well, awesome. I will make sure to link all of that in the description below. Thank you so much for coming on, Kyle, man. It's been awesome.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's show. I look forward to your feedback and your comments and down below. I'm going to link everything in the description, and I really hope you're going to enjoy the holidays and also that you're driving safe out there on the roads. I'll see you next week. Bye.